Thank you. So I'm just going to get straight into it. So the aim, well, let me just connect my clicker first. Is it going to work? Oh, there he is, right. So the aim of the game today, one simple rule. I'm going to change how you write CSS. And I'm going to do that by introducing you to fluid typography, fluid space, flexible layouts, all underpinned by progressive enhancement. And you might be thinking, well, why progressively enhance? Well, the reason we progressively enhance is because we build for everyone, not just ourselves, not our peer groups. And this is because the web is truly global. It's got a truly global audience. And you never actually know whether the browser, so the browser that the user is using, they're going to have plugins and extensions that are pulverizing your page. They might work in a corporate network that's blocking resources. You never know. So it's best to progressively enhance to provide a better experience. And speaking of experience, no one will ever complain about getting a good experience. And that's what they'll get with progressive enhancement. They might not get the best experience, but they'll get an experience that works for them. And that's the most important thing. So I guarantee you today as well that if they do get that good experience, then they'll be able to do what they come to do on the website. If your website's relying on certain technologies and certain frameworks that may not have worked because of said Chrome extensions or network layers, then they're not going to be able to do what they came to do. So that's the reasoning. Now, if you get your devices out, we're going to do a CSS quiz. Well, not really. No, we're going to build a website together, or at least build pieces of a website together so you can understand how I like to do things. So if you've got your device, go ahead and visit this URL. And what you'll get there is a website that I've pre-built and pre-designed, and it should look great on your device, regardless of what device you've got, whether that's a phone, whether that's a laptop, whether it's a tablet. Now, if you're comfortable, go ahead and show what you see to the person sat next to you. And if you're really comfortable, go ahead, take a screenshot, and share it onto the conference hashtag. Now, if you haven't actually been able to load it on your screen, this is what you're going to see. So this is a truly responsive website, and it's built with progressive enhancement, fluid type, and fluid space. Now, I can almost bet any money that it looks different on each and every person's device, and that's great. That's what I want. What I want is the website to work for you. It doesn't have to look pixel perfect. So that's what we're doing. Now, you're probably thinking, come on, Andy, get on with it. What are we actually going to do? So I'll just give you a bit of context. So all the CSS you're going to see today is just vanilla CSS, but it's all been smushed together with a bit of post-CSS. And it's all underpinned by, hold your breath, Tailwind CSS, which you might be surprised to hear, but I'm going to explain how Tailwind is used throughout as we go through the talk. That's why I proudly put my hand up earlier when Vitaly said he uses Tailwind CSS. Now, you can't just build it with Tailwind CSS with this methodology, though. So we're going to use a CSS methodology too. And what a CSS methodology is a set of rules and principles that help you to organize your CSS. And the methodology we're going to use today is one called Cube CSS. Now, what Cube CSS is a methodology that's oriented towards simplicity, pragmatism, and consistency. And it's designed to work with the medium that you're working with, often the browser, rather than against it. So mentoring the browser rather than micromanaging it. Now, I'm not going to go into loads of detail about Cube CSS because I've done that before, and I haven't got that much time to play with. So I'm going to do a quick whiz tour through it. But if you want to find out more, you can go on cube.fyi, and that's got all the documentation. It's got a talk that I did a couple of years ago, which goes into a lot of detail about it. But for now, let's just get into the quick tour. So it's broken up into 5 parts. There's the most important part, which is global CSS. That doesn't fit in the acronym, though. Otherwise, it'd be a weird acronym, wouldn't it? But then there's the actual acronym itself. So there's composition, utilities, blocks, and exceptions. So the global CSS is the most important part. You write as much CSS as you can, as high up as you can, because you want the browser to use Cascade and inheritance to feed styles into the elements naturally, rather than forcing them onto elements. And then there's composition. So what a composition is a skeletal layout system. So it doesn't matter what you put in the layouts, the layout just does one job, and that's its layout, nothing else. It doesn't care about what components are in it. All it cares about is how to lay them out. Then there's utilities, and this is where our good friend Tailwind steps in. And also, utilities are classes that do one job and do that one job well. So it might be a wrapper that pushes all the content into the middle of the page. So it doesn't just have to be a single property to value relationship. And then finally, second to finally, sorry, there's blocks. And they're your components, it's your card, your button. And the idea of a block is it goes against the global CSS that you've written already. It's an exception to the rule, and speaking of exceptions, they're exceptions to that. So they're state changes. That's a disabled state or a reverse state. And this is the only time in Cube CSS where you want finite control over a component or an element, because we use HTML data attributes as the selectors. And that's because we want finite state. You can add as many classes as you like to an element for modifiers, but you never know what class is going to be applied. Whereas with an exception, because it's got one value, you know exactly what you're getting, so then you can apply that more stringent CSS. That's enough CSS for now. Let's talk about the most important thing on the web, and that's programming HTML. So we're building up foundations now. So we're going to start from the most important part. We're going to build our foundation, then we're going to keep building on top of it. So why is HTML important? Semantic HTML especially. Now, one of the main reasons is it gives the tools that help people to access content a helping hand. So this could be a screen reader, it could be a browser, it could be a reader view in the browser, it could even be a scraping tool. Using semantic HTML helps them to help people. The other thing is, if the CSS doesn't load, the website still makes sense. And that's because the browser ships what's called user agent styles. So they're default styles. And if you use semantic HTML elements, it'll make sense to the user. They'll be able to see the headings, they'll be able to see lists, links, etc. And the really important part, because we're progressively enhancing, we're not backfilling for old browsers. When old browsers fail, and when people use old browsers, which they still do, because we're using semantic HTML, they're going to get a great experience because they're going to get a HTML web page. So you get the HTML right, you're building on a solid foundation. If you don't get it right, you're building on sand, and what happens when you build on top of sand? It all sinks to the bottom. So this is the overall, this is the sort of outline of our page, right? So it's just one big long blog post, and in fact, that page that you've got on your device now is actually this talk, so I could just go if you want, and then you could read that. But the reason why it all makes sense is because we've broken it up into sections. So we've got a main element, and then inside of there we've got article, 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 and that breaks chunks of content up for those tools that I've just been discussing. And what we get is this, by default. So we've not written any CSS yet. We just got a beautiful HTML web page. Doesn't it look great? You can see the headings because of your semantic heading hierarchy. You can see lists, you can see links. Everything just works great. So let's start making it look good. And let's get stuck into some CSS programming. So the first thing we want to do, so remember, we're building up, we're building up, we're building up on top of everything. So what we're going to do is level the playing field a bit. And by leveling the playing field, I mean add some reset styles just to make sure that everything is just how we like it before we start writing our own CSS. Now, back in the old days, a CSS reset would be really heavy duty. You'd be resetting everything because browsers are horrible. But now browsers are really nice, just as Michelle showed us in her talk this morning. So we don't really need to adjust too much. All we need to do is just make a couple of adjustments to make our lives a little bit easier. So we use this reset here, which is one I wrote a couple of years ago. So to remind you what we've got, this is the HTML page with no CSS. And then we had these 42 lines of CSS. Now, there's not much going on here, right? You've got a bit of box model work going on. You've got some margin being removed, a couple of list styles, nothing dramatic. And then what you get is this. So it's the same HTML page. You can see the spacing's being removed because we want to look after spacing in a minute. And we've just removed a few bits just to make our lives a little bit easier. So again, more foundational work. We've got a HTML foundation, we've got a reset foundation, and then we can start to add the Cube CSS foundation. And what's the most important part of Cube CSS? Global CSS. So the first thing we're going to look at with our global CSS is tokenizing our CSS. So these are some design tokens that have been converted into CSS custom properties. Now, these are constants. These are generated by Tailwind, you wouldn't believe, with a custom plugin that I put together that spits out these custom properties. Now, these sit at the top of the page, and everything else reads off of them by default. So this is right at the top of our CSS, as global as it gets. And then underneath them, we've got some hand-rolled variables too. So you can see I'm applying the spacing scale to create gutter for the layouts, and I'm applying the text sizes for border radius. I've written a couple of transitions, and then tracking rules as well, which is the space between letters. So with them in place, we've got the constants, then we've got the hand-rolled variables. We can finally start to color the website in, as it were. So the first thing we do is we use our body tag, being everything that sits in the body is visible. And we use all inheritable properties in the body. So that's color, background, font size, font family, line height, and finally letter spacing. And what you get is this. So you can see the enormous impact that that tiny snippet of CSS has had already, because we're letting the browser just inherit and cascade the CSS as it goes. We're not doing anything else, we're just letting it do its job. So we're going to go on a little tour now, a little segue. We've started writing our code, but I wanted to show you my favorite part of web design at the moment, and that's fluid type and fluid space. And to do that, I'm going to show you another demo to really just show you how it all works. But first, I'm going to give you some context. So check out this diagram. This is from a 2015 Open Signal report on device fragmentation of Android devices. Now remember that, Android devices. Now you can see there's an unbelievable amount of different screen sizes there. And then remember 2 points. It's only Android devices, so that's not Apple devices, not Windows devices. And it's also 2015, so that's 7 years ago. So imagine how much more fragmentation's come around since then too. And I can show you that in this one quick demo. So you can see it's got massive typography, and then we've got like small summaries that go with it. And you can see that this rather over-exaggerated example, where the text is like way too small or way too large as we scroll through the viewports. Now, there's a better way to do things. But first, we'll look at how we actually wrote it. So it's not too bad, right? We started at the bottom. We wrote the smallest text sizes first, and then we used the media query. You know, we decided to go old school and do 3 breakpoints. And then we've just increased the text size there. And then you'd be thinking, well, that's fine. Just add another breakpoint. All right, let's add another one. But then what about all the other devices? Think of that diagram. Like, there's all these different sizes. Do we write a breakpoint for all of them? No, of course we don't. Otherwise, our CSS would be a mess. So there's an easier way to do it, a much more effective way of doing it, and that's using fluid type. And as you can see there, the typography is flexing with the viewport. And as we saw earlier in Michelle's talk, it's very simple to do. So the first part of the CSS clamp rule that we're using to do it is the smallest font size we want. And then the last rule is the largest font size we want. So they're what we call locks. They're lock sizes. It can never get too small, it can never get too large. And then in the middle, we're saying, try and aim for about 5 viewport widths, so like 5% of the screen. But then, as we saw earlier, add a rem unit to it so the text can still be zoomed, because if you zoom without adding that, obviously the viewport will shrink as you zoom, so therefore the type will never scale. So it's an accessibility failure. And that's it. But we can improve that, because you can see there's a ratio in place, right? The headings are always nice and big, and the summaries are always nice and small. So how do we do that? We do that by scales. And this is what we've been doing in design forever. And I've been doing design for a long time. And even in the print days, we were still using size and space scales. And this is what it looks like. So everything's built on a ratio. So the ratio that we've got here is what's called a major third ratio, and that's 1.25. And what you do is you multiply the following font size by 1.25 each time, and you get this nice linear scale. And what do you get for that? You get flow and rhythm on the page by default. So this is what it looks like in context. So you can see you start at 1 rem, then you go on to 1.25, 1.56, 195, etc. So it's linear growth each time. But that doesn't work in our context, right? Because we've got these massive headings on larger viewports and smaller headings on smaller viewports. So how do we do that? Well, we use Utopia, which is my favorite tool on the web. It's made by the great people at ClearLeft, and they designed this tool to fix the need that they had with fluid typography. And what we do is we put in our 2 type scales, because we've got loads of space on desktop and larger viewports, and then we use a much more conservative type scale for smaller devices, because we haven't got as much space. So the growth between sizes is really shallow on the smaller ones, and then the growth is much larger on the larger viewports. Now you can see we've got these other properties too, so width, it's like a viewport width. Now this is the only time today where we're actually going to be specific. And I'm saying, look, 320 is about right for the baseline size, and then 1350 is equal to the container wrapper that we've got on the page too. So after it gets to there, I don't want the type to scale anymore, because then it'll scale beyond the size that we like, even with the locks. And this is what it generates, is that tool. Looks pretty ugly, right? But it doesn't matter, because we're going to set this and we're going to forget about it. We're just going to plonk it in our CSS, and then this is our entire type scale, all set in one. Now, you can quickly see how it works here. So you can see like that step 8 specifically gets huge on the bigger viewports, but as we go down the viewports, it gets really nice and small. And you can see the way that the growth changes as well, and the shape changes as we move through the viewports too. Spacing is near enough the same deal. You set using the same sort of ratios and the same base sizes, and then you generate this. And you create your own multipliers for spacing in Utopia, and there's a reason for that, because if you use the typography scale for your spacing, it'd be really hard to create like in-between space sizes. With spacing, you often need a bit more control. So you can create your own ratios and get complete fluid space with that too. Just on space as well, and I'll show you how this works in practice. You can set space in pairs. So you can say, take the smallest value from the smallest viewport and take the largest value from the step up in the larger viewport. So you get this lovely like progression of space, because again, on smaller viewports, you've got very little space to work with, and then on larger viewports, you've got much more space to work with. And that's how those chunks of content are put together on this site. They're using one of those spacing pairs to get that fully responsive spacing, and no media query is required. So that's what I'm into. That's what underpins this whole talk. So let's now put it in practice and apply it to our page. So let's get back to coloring in. So we've done our core body styles. So let's enhance them a little bit now. We'll do a bit of typesetting too. So with the typography, we're going to grab our headings first, our top 3 headings, and we're going to say, bring the line height down, because it's a good design tip. The nice tight line height for big typography looks nice and neat. And then we're going to reduce the letter spacing for those headings too, because we're using Inter as our font. There's plenty of space to work with, so we can just pull the letters together a little bit. And then we work down the space scale for the heading hierarchy too. So you can see there, step 5, step 4, step 3. And then sticking on typography, we're going to do what I would say is the quickest way to make your website look better. And that is to apply max width to flow content. Now you can see we're using a CH unit there. And what a CH unit is a character unit. And it's equal to the width of a 0 at the rendered size and rendered font family that you've got. So if you reduce the width of your flow content, then it's easier for people to scan line by line. If you've got really long paragraphs, you get to the end of the line, and then they've got to drop down and start again from the start. That's really difficult for people with cognitive issues, so you get 2 benefits. Your website looks better, and it's more accessible by default. Then we add some more global CSS, and on here it's just, we're setting some link styles, and we're styling up some block quotes, we're doing SVGs. We're just doing as much as we can, as high up as we can. Now, this is a really simple design, so we don't have to write too much, but we've got enough to get going. And the impact is this, a complete transformation. And you can see that flow content being reduced in width. It makes it much easier to read. You can see the heading hierarchy's now got a type scale. Even without spacing, we've got flow and rhythm on the page. So we can now start to progress on to the next part of Cube, which is the utilities. I'm going to start applying some detail. We're just building on the foundations. And we're going to work with my favorite 3 lines of CSS. Now, this, if you've read every layout, will look very familiar. This is what's called the lobotomized AL selector, which my good friend Hayden coined. And there's also the source of many debate between Hayden and I, which is the arrow combinator that goes with it too. And what that does is, instead of recursively selecting all the sibling elements, what the AL selector does, the arrow selector gives you that direct child relationship. So what it means is you're not going to keep adding margin to more sibling elements that come on. I think that's better. Hayden not so much. But there we go. And then what we do is we add margin top to each sibling element. So we're not adding margin to everything, we're just adding it to each sibling element. And this is the most important part, is the way that we're deciding what the value should be. So we're looking for a variable called flow space. Now, if that exists, that's fine, we'll use it. But if it doesn't exist, we're going to provide a fallback value for it. And this is where we start mentoring the browser. So we say use 1em if you can't find flow space. 1em is relative to the font size. Therefore, by default, you're going to get natural flow and rhythm because we're using a size scale in order to size our typography. So you can see here that on the paragraphs, you've got a reasonable amount of space, but then on the subheading that follows it, you've got much more space because that's a larger font size than the others. So you apply the flow utility without any other intervention, you get free flow and rhythm by default. And then if you add some context to it and say, look, define flow space as 10 rem, that variable pick up, and then you get that nice consistent space instead. So you've got these tools available to you. And that's a really quick utility. It's doing one job, and it's doing it well. So the next part is those chunks that I was talking about before, what I like to call regions. So you can see you've got like very definitive chunks of content. So we write a new utility for that. We call it region. And inside of region, we add padding top and padding bottom. And we're using the exact same model for deciding how much padding to add. So we first look for a region space. Now, that's probably not going to be defined. So then we say pick the spacing pair from the sizing scale by default. So by default, you're going to have nice big chunks. But if you want, you can reduce that or make it larger by defining a region space variable. And that's, again, how we got this. So we applied region to all the elements. And then we get this nice chunked content with flow and rhythm straight out of the box. So you can see we're writing very little CSS here, but we're making a huge impact each time because we're letting the browser make its mind up. We're saying, look, do this. This is what the rule is. You work out what's best based on the viewport. So we've got that foundation in place. Now we can start to look at our compositions and our layouts. Now, there's only one layout to really worry about on this page, and that's this grid, right? So at the top of the site, you've got these cards, which is a two-column grid. And then further down the page, you've got this like tools of the trade, and they're using a 3-column grid. So how can we do that? And you're probably thinking media queries. Well, actually, probably not, because Michelle's already shown us a cool way to do it earlier. But let's pretend she didn't. So this is the rule that I've written, and it's very similar to what Michelle showed you earlier, actually, where we use the auto placement in order to create this responsive grid. Now, by doing that, we create a repeat rule, so that it repeats for every single column. And we're using the same model again. So we're saying, first, look for a grid placement variable. And if you can't find that, use autofill. And what that does is it'll create new columns to fill the space where it can. And then we use a sizing. So we're going to use min-max again. So the first thing we're going to do in min-max is we're going to say, look for a min-item size. And if you can't find that, 16 rem, which seems to be our favorite base, Michelle. And then otherwise, for the maximum, take a portion of space, so one fractal unit, one FR. And then what we get is this. It looks rubbish. And you think, right, OK, he's messed up. You can't possibly make this look any better. Well, we can. We're not going to use media queries. We're going to use an exception to our composition. So remember how I said exceptions use HTML data attributes as selectors because we want rigid control at this point. We want rigid control, this layout. Well, rigid with a small r. So we set data layout is 50-50. We set grid placement to use autofit instead of autofill, and that means that it'll try and fill space with the columns, but it'll still create new columns as well. And then the min item size, we're going to use our favorite CSS feature, clamp. So we're going to nick that initial value, 16 rem, it works pretty well. But then the magic's in the middle. Now, what we're saying to this layout is make it 50 viewport widths, which is 50% of the viewport. And then you'll be thinking, well, that's never going to happen, because even on large viewports, you've got that wrapping container. And this is the key. We're not micromanaging the browser. We're just giving it an idea of what we're after. We're saying, look, aim for this. I've given you a minimum and maximum. Just aim for this 50% if you can. And by doing that, you get this free layout. You know, it's completely responsive. It doesn't matter what the viewport is. It's going to render the right result based on the rule that we've set for it. Job done. Happy days. So we'll move on to the blocks, because we're already here, so we might as well color the cards in. And they're the components, right? These are the specific component styles. And we're going to do a bit of progressive enhancement with these cards. So this is the baseline that we're after. So you can see, you know, black background, white text, easy peasy, right? So we'll do that first. That's easy. And then on the last line of CSS, we're saying unset the max width. And the reason we're doing that, remember when I said that a block's job is to override global CSS? Well, in our global CSS, we said that list elements, part of flow content, should have a max width applied to them. Now I'm just making an assumption that a card might be a list item. So I'm just giving the browser a helping hand and saying, look, let the composition do the layout for you. Don't worry about how big you are. So that's all that CSS set. And we get this. It doesn't look great, does it? You've got this big gap at the bottom of this card here. So how can we fix that? Let's do a masonry layout. So masonry is a really cool new layout that we get with CSS Grid. But the problem with masonry is it's only supported in Firefox. I think it might even be a dev edition still. And you have to enable it with a flag. So there's very little people are going to be able to see this layout. So we're going to use the same model that we did for the two-column grid. We're going to set a data rows equals masonry HTML selector. And then in our grid CSS, we're going to hook onto that. And all you have to do is say grid template rows equals masonry. Job done. That's your masonry layout sorted. And then what we're going to do is we're going to enhance the minimum viable experience that we've already set. So we're going to set the grid alignment to be start rather than stretch that is by default. So what we get is this. And I reckon 99.999% of the people in this room have seen this today. And I bet 99.999% of the people in this room had no idea it was supposed to be a masonry layout. And that's progressive enhancement in action. You've got a good experience. You have no idea what the best experience is, but it works bloody well. And if you're lucky enough to have that layout, you get this. So as you can see, it's like remapped the cards and blocked them out like masonry layout. So let's do the last bit of CSS coding, and let's build this three-column grid as well. So I'm going to do this in a block to just show you how you can work both with blocks and exceptions. So imagine I've created a block which is all of these items, and I've called it features. So instead, inside of this features block, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it like a configuration object for all of the utilities and compositions. Remember, they're all looking for these variables and providing fallbacks. So I'm going to give them the variables to look for. So again, we're going to use the auto-fit to help size the columns. We're going to set grid min item size to be 33% this time, but we're going to use the same model. And then we're going to set the gutter, which is a global variable that we set. So we're using the Cascade and specificity, which I can't say because I'm northern. And then we've got the flow space, which we're bunching it together because we're in a smaller context. The only actual styling I've done is written text align center. I mean, sure, I've written a couple of bits of CSS that, size the icons and make the links look better. But what we get is that. And all we've done to achieve that is just make a couple of adjustments to already existing parts of CSS. We're writing much less CSS. And that's the model for the entire web page that you can see here. Fluid type, fluid space, small, flexible utilities and components. And that's what you get, a truly responsive website. So obviously, I've had to run through this super quick. So I've not shown you a lot of the stuff that's on the page. So if you go to this, it loads up a glitch, which is like posh CodePen. So you can see all the file structure. And you can play with it and adjust things, and you can see how it all comes together. So if you've got some time later, have a look at that and have a play around with it. And that's the entire source code for the page. So I'll close out, and I'll give you the whole reason why we do this. So I don't think we've ever had it better than what we've got now. So I came into the industry in 2009. And back in 2009, we had IE6, IE7, and responsive web design was just coming around the corner. Now, the problem here was there was a period, which I don't like to think about, when we had to build responsive websites that also supported IE6, which was just pure hell. It was the worst time to be a front-end developer. And I think that a lot of frameworks and heavy-handed tools are a symptom of this horrible period of browser compatibility issues. So these tools are redundant now with all this that I've shown you today, right? Not necessarily. I think these tools can be repurposed rather than being made redundant. There's a few heavy-handed methodologies that I won't talk about, like CSS and JS, sorry. But I think Tailwind's actually quite useful, right? So what I've used Tailwind for in this project is a utility class generator. And that's it. It doesn't do anything else. We barely ever touch the Tailwind config. Sure, it generates those custom properties for us, but what it's doing is being really useful and helping us to manage our design tokens. So it's almost like a translator between the JSON file, which is the design tokens, and then the CSS that's generated. So in that sense, Tailwind's really bloody useful. Just like my old PlayStation games are really bloody useful as coasters rather than playing on the PlayStation. So I'll close out with this example, right? So you're probably thinking, right, Andy, that's cool. This site that you've designed is pretty simple, and I agree, it is. But what about the real world? Does it scale, as people like to say? Well, let me tell you, it does. So last year, we were commissioned by Google to help them redesign and rebuild the front end of web.dev. Now, the brief was simple. They wanted their developers that maintain the site to be able to compose new pages with little to no design intervention. So what's the best way to do that? You give them a flexible system of fluid type, fluid space, cube CSS, helpful utilities, helpful compositions. And it means the developers can just chuck all this stuff together. And it seems to work really well still, which is good. So that's a huge website, and it is an enormous website. But you can also build cool websites too. So we run a creative agency. So last year, we did a very creative project. Now, this site is for a studio, and they wanted huge typography, they wanted glitching, they wanted special tricks and lots of animations, as you can see here. But we've built this in exactly the same way that we've built today's demo site. We've built with progressive enhancement, we've used fluid type, we've used fluid space. And it was this project that made me obsessed with the route that we've gone, because if you look on the smaller viewports, the headings are nice and tiny. But then as you move through the sizes, those headings get absolutely huge. And we were only able to do that by using the tooling that I've shown you today. So to finish up, I'll leave you with this message. So remember, always be the browser's mentor and not its micromanager. And always challenge over-complex solutions that you come up with and your teammates come up with. Always challenge everything. There's always a simpler way to do things. It might not be the quickest way, but it'll have the best long-term effect. And with all that knowledge, go forth and build excellent websites. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Annie. Thank you so much. Wow, this has been quite... Oh, we will have a conversation.
Oh, here we go.
Interesting. Yeah. We have some questions, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
One of them that came up quite a bit of time. How would Cube CSS, or pretty much the kind of the approach that you're suggesting, play in a React environment, in a Vue environment, whenever you get these components? You might want to scope your CSS to that component and all that. So what would you say to that?
I think that the first question is, you've got to ask yourself, like, why do you want to scope your CSS? Is there a reason for that? Is it because you've maybe not got team members that are CSS fluent, as it were? Or is it you giving yourself this false level of control that you think you're getting? So React and Vue and Cube work the same as HTML and Cube does, because what they spit out at the end of the sausage factory is HTML, right? So you use it in exactly the same way, but Cube isn't for everyone. I mean, we're doing a project for a client now with a design system research. Cube's not going to work for them because their developers don't write CSS. So we're instead going to be recommending different approaches which will make their more specific CSS more manageable over time instead. So it may work for you, it may not. It's definitely not the right or wrong way to write CSS, that's for sure.
All right. But also what you're writing about normalizing the just 42 lines that you have there.
Yeah.
So basically that would be a reasonable replacement for pretty much any normalized CSS or anything like that we were using in the past.
Yeah, don't tell Eric Meyer. But it's actually his reset is nice and simple. But I wanted to go even further with the simplification because we don't have that cross-browser problem that we used to have once upon a time in the dark old days. So it's just a case of making tiny adjustments to level the playing field, as it were, yeah.
Right. It's interesting. We have so many conversations about Tailwind today.
I know. Can you believe it?
Yeah, but it's interesting to see. Yeah, but it's interesting to see that you are kind of using Tailwind only for like a really small portion of it, because I've seen some projects where basically you write your Tailwind and then you transform kind of the composition of the couple of classes that you might have. You transform them into auto-generated BAM-alike class names, which are then used for, to build blocks out from that. But in your case, you kind of take it the other way around, where you just use it for utility classes.
That's pretty much it, yeah. Yeah, and the blocks, yeah.
And then use them in there. So where do you see in general then Tailwind being useful? Is it the only application where you feel like, yeah, that makes sense to me? Or
no. I mean, this is a really important point, right? It doesn't matter what tool you choose, but it's probably not going to work for you over X amount of years. It might work for you today, but you should always challenge what tool choices you're making as well. So the reason I actually went to Tailwind, so when it first came out, it used to generate this horrible wall of crap. And then over time, they developed it where it actually only generates utilities that it can find on the page. And I thought that's really useful for making little to no CSS. So that's why I actually started using it. But in the future, a better tool might come along, and to be honest, I'll jump at it like anything, because it does make me feel a bit weird using Tailwind. But yeah, it doesn't matter. Tools don't matter. The end result is what the user gets, and that's what actually matters, is how you generate that good quality front end for them.
Okay, there's also one question about refactoring. So if you have a big project and you have to restructure it, and you have a lot of legacy code, which is written maybe in a very different way, a lot of stuff, how would you approach it? Like, where would you start? Would you rebuild page by page? Would you identify components and rebuild them? What would be your kind of process there?
It's a good question. So the first thing I do with the refactor is I'll disable where I think the sources of CSS come from, and then see what happens. So if I remove what I think all the CSS sources and everything's still laid out and there's still stuff going on, it's like, all right, well, where's that CSS coming from? So it's finding all the routes to the CSS. And then there's two ways you can do it. Well, that's what I tend to do. So there's what I call the rollout and replace methods. So you take, like you said, you take page by page or section by section, and then you implement the newer front end to that, and then you sort of let these two systems work in harmony with each other. That's how we did the web dev site. There was a period of time where two halves of that project looked completely different to each other. But then eventually the old system can just safely be thrown in the bin. Or there's the other way where you can use like namespacing and then start applying the new refactored CSS. But it's plagued with problems, and it's really difficult. So I tend to go with the first option.
Okay. Well, so many questions that came up in here. One of them is what tool you were using for the multi-browser view. I believe it's PolyPen.
PolyPen, yeah, absolutely.
So maybe you could explain what it is for those who might not have.
So it's essentially a browser, and then you can add as many viewports as you like. If you like to build a Tailwind CSS as your main source of CSS, you can implement the breakpoints from your configuration. Or what I do, and like what you saw today, is I just like put loads of breakpoints, like random size breakpoints, and I use that as my main development browser now. So I'm always looking at all of the different sizes at all times, and it helps you to catch those little responsive oddities that you might introduce if you're looking at the same resolution while you're working on it. Yeah, it's a great app. Yes.
Yeah. So if you're looking for it, it's PolyPen, PolyPane, like PolyPen. It's a really, really good.
There's a link to it on that page that we just built as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that's also interesting. So you seem to be avoiding media queries and use exceptions instead. But how would it work then with container queries?
I think Michelle demonstrated that perfectly earlier, where it's using the container unit as the basis of the fluid type. So you'd use the exact same system that we've just done then. Instead of using a viewport unit, you use a container query unit instead. So in terms of like actual container queries, so there was a period when, if you ask me, what's the feature of CSS that you want tomorrow? And the first thing I say is container queries before you even finish the question. But then since they've come, I've actually like started to think, well, how am I going to use them? And in between that, there was the clamp-based layout and the way that I've done things today. And I'm thinking, well, when I want more specific detail, that's maybe where I use container queries. But for general page layout, I can't see them being used very frequently for me. But that's just me. So
okay, well, we'll see
we'll see how it goes. Yeah, exactly.
How it's going to evolve over time. Yeah. So CSS and JS.
Not big. I never really saw the benefit of it.
Styled components.
Yeah. Again, but I mean, for context, I'm a designer that learned CSS because I was fed up with people building my designs wrong. So like, it was out of spite. I didn't do it because I was an enthusiastic developer. I did it because
you are enthusiastic.
Well, obviously, yeah, now. But at the time, I was like, surely it's not that hard. So I'll just learn it myself. And it turns out it's not. You just got to use your eyes when you develop things. Yeah.
So what would you say somebody is being in a really heavy React-driven development where you have pretty much CSS and JS and all, would you say that there is enough arguments to say, well, if you turn away from this, maybe also with Tailwind, if you turn away from this to this approach, let's say, this probably is going to make CSS smaller?
Yeah, and there'll be a point where when you build sites like this where it builds itself, right? So because you're letting the browser do all the work, you can just like plop components in. Surely that's more appealing to like someone who doesn't want to author CSS. Whereas if those sorts of approaches, they're having to like stuff CSS into every single component that's, reinventing the wheel every single time, which is not how CSS was designed to work, is it? So, yeah, I've never been into it.
All right, and maybe the last one here. So how does this concept fit with Cascade Layers? Do you use Cascade Layers?
I actually don't at the moment, no. I'm a bit behind with this stuff. It's moving so quick, is CSS. It's like I literally can't keep up, yeah. But so one good way it could work is you could create a utilities layer, and then that would have more specificity than like the main CSS. So you just get that little tick on there, maybe for exceptions as well to give them that maximum effectiveness. But I haven't used them yet. I need to skill up, do a bit of learning. Has anyone written any blogs? You've written a couple of blogs, haven't you? Yeah. I'll read some of them. Yeah. All
right. And maybe just like I asked Michelle, it would be interesting to hear from you. Do you have any except container queries? What would be on your dream list of things that you would love to come in CSS at some point soon?
Native fluid type. So native fluid type, we shouldn't have to do it with clamp. Should be able to set.
So you want to do even less?
Yes. Yeah, I want to write even less CSS. Yeah.
But don't you enjoy writing CSS?
I've enjoyed the result that comes out of it. Yeah. So the quicker I can get to the result, the happier I am. I want to work less, really. I don't want to work more.
So what about like if we take it all the way?
Yeah.
So what about like themes or templates built in the browser? That would make even less work.
Well, you still have to make like specific CSS to implement the beautiful design that you've come up with. But when you've got accent color, which will do a lot of the work.
Accent color can do a lot already. I mean, at this point.
You should be able to say font dash ratio 1.25, and then job done, and it'll just fluidly scale with the browser. So, yeah.
Yeah. So this sounds very exciting.
I can never write that proposal. No, I'm not smart enough. Yeah.
It's interesting because I remember the conversation I had with I don't know, I think maybe 6 or 7 years ago. We had a conversation for a very brief moment of time when sorry about mentioning jQuery all the time, but there was a conversation about should jQuery, because it's such a big thing and it's everywhere, shouldn't be just a part of the browser? So you would never have to request it.
We had that with React as well, didn't we?
Yes, React. And so
I imagine
we have this conversation also happening around Tailwind. Tailwind is such a big story. Shouldn't be just part of the browser, so you never have to load it, and you use all the utility classes that everybody in the community agrees upon and call it a day?
I don't get it. Like, you use these frameworks as a sort of way of helping you manage working with the browser. So what version of Tailwind is in the browser?
This is where it's becoming.
What version of jQuery is in the browser? But then jQuery influenced a lot of what vanilla JavaScript does now, didn't it? So, I mean, maybe Tailwind won't do much to inspire the CSS spec team, but you never know. Like, maybe not. They're going to have a real problem with layer, though, in Tailwind, because they've got a layer thing in that framework, too. Right. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. But
right. Yeah. Well, if you'd like to write less CSS, I'm sure you can ask all your questions next to the Smashing stand, where I think you, Andy, will be happy to answer all CSS and maybe even non-CSS related questions.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. It's always mysterious, a little bit mysterious. Who knows? Who knows? But thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me. Cheers. Thank you, everyone.